Back in 2006, the United States Postal Service was doing really well. They were doing so well, in fact, that they were talking about converting half their vehicle fleet, because they have the largest vehicle fleet in the United States. They were talking about converting half their vehicle fleet to electric-only cars, which would have been a huge boost for the electric car industry. And, of course, the fossil fuel industry was not happy about that. Fossil fuel industry owns a lot of Republicans. The Postal Service was also the largest union, the second largest employer in the United States. The largest employer in the United States is Walmart. They don't have, we got no stinking unions. In fact, the one time Walmart did get unionized in Canada, Walmart just closed the store. The second largest employer in the United States is the post office, which is almost all unionized. And a lot of Republicans don't like that either. A lot of Democrats do, because union folks tend to go out and knock on doors and do things to help the Democrats, fairly or unfairly. So here you had this critical mass being reached of Republicans saying, and oil barons, the Koch brothers and whatnot, saying, this is pretty horrible. I mean, you know, the post office is like going to jumpstart the electric car industry, and they're unionized. We got to do something about this. And so in 2006, a slick little piece of legislation was passed. And I think, frankly, most Democrats who voted for it didn't even realize that this provision was in it, that said, the Postal Modernization Act, that said that the post office, and only the post office, this has never happened before with any government agency in the history of the world, and there's no private corporation that has to do this either, that said that the post office has to set aside over a 10-year period, starting in 2006, ending in 2016, every year for 10 years, has to set aside enough money to pay all the health retirement benefits of anybody that goes to work for the post office in the next 75 years. In other words, the post office has to set aside over $5.5 billion a year for the next 10 years to pay for the health benefits of people who are not yet even born. Now, why would you do that? To take down the post office. And guess what? The post office, all of a sudden, the next year, stopped talking about electric cars and stopped talking about even, good pay for their union members, and has been in a progressively worse and worse and worse crisis every year since then. Bernie Sanders and others have introduced legislation to reverse this, or to simply turn the post office to say, you want to fund the postal retirement fund, fine, there's already $30 billion in that fund. That's enough, that's more than virtually anybody in corporate America, more than any government agency has. Just stop now and let the post office recover. But the Republicans filibuster it in the Senate and will not even consider it in the House of Representatives. So that's the story from my point of view. Let's get Carrie Lukas's point of view, the Independent Women's Forum. She's the managing director, IWF.org. Carrie, where would you disagree with the story?
Well, I mean, for starters, Tom, I think that, as you can imagine, I think that a lot of Americans start by wondering, why is it that we still have a federally subsidized mail monopoly?
It's not subsidized.
Because it would be great.
Not a penny of your tax dollars goes to the post office.
Excuse me?
It has not been subsidized since the Reagan administration. Ronald Reagan created the post office, or set aside the post office, or carved it out, rather, as an agency that gets no federal dollars. 100% of the cost of running the post office comes from the cost of postage, period.
Certainly, but it's a monopoly, Tom. You would certainly consider it a special provision carved out by the government that it's illegal to pay anybody else to deliver mail. And I believe a lot of these costs you're talking about, I haven't heard that, I haven't heard anybody make the claim that the postal system and the postal retirement system is in such fabulous financial shape. I think that
take a look at their books.
Countless experts have been talking about the need to reform the post office because, let's face it, mail is going the way of the dodo, and most of what people are getting through the post office isn't personal mail. It's not even bills. It's nothing you want. Most of it is junk mail. So what it really is the post office is now a way for corporate America, those guys you hate, Tom, to have their paper products jam our mailboxes with catalogs. It's bad for the environment. It's not good for individuals, and it's draining away. The post office says it can't continue operating. So my piece wrote about just saying, can't we finally greenlight the idea that the post office is allowed to cut Saturday, stuffing our mailboxes with junk mail on Saturdays? But, apparently no, there's, never a time where we can possibly allow government to shrink. Therefore, we have to, force the post office to keep running a deficit.
Well, once again, the post office is not government. I mean, Ben Franklin created the post office as a government agency, and the government historically owned the post office. But the post office, Reagan spun the post office off as a private not-for-profit corporation with the head guy appointed by the I think it requires a Senate confirmation. I'm not sure, but it's basically appointed by the president, by the executive branch. Not unlike the Fed. The Fed is a private agency, although it interacts with our government. But that's because there are large places in the United States where without the post office, without this is why the founders put this in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, that the Congress had the authority to create a post office and postal roads. You talk about, subsidies, although the post office doesn't take a penny in tax dollars and hasn't since the Reagan administration. The reality is that FedEx and UPS are using the post office constantly. They use them for what's called last mile delivery. The largest part of this is up in Sarah Palin's Alaska. The socialist governor who gave everybody $2,000 every year from their oil revenues. In Alaska, there are places where for FedEx and UPS it's not profitable for them to go. So you ship something FedEx or UPS, it will get to the post office, and then the postal person will take it what's called the last mile, and they cut a special deal with them for that.
This is fine, and then I wish we all hate Federal Express and UPS.
I don't hate either one of them. UPS is a fully unionized company. I think that it's a great organization.
Well, good. Well, then that's okay. Great. Well, then, but why don't we force them instead? You could, if instead of having a ridiculous, hundreds of thousands of people working in a post office, which is obviously antiquated, and again, mostly just shuffling.
It's very modern, and it works just fine.
Of corporations, why don't you just make USPS create regulations to make USPS and Federal Express do some of the jobs that the post office is currently doing?
Well, they wouldn't be profitable.
Okay, well, how is it, Tom? If how is it you make it sound as though USPS, like the post office, has never taken subsidies, which I don't think is true.
No, I said they haven't since the Reagan administration.
They bailed out quite a bit from taxpayers. Obviously, their money's coming somewhere. So if
it comes from postage.
You make it sound like they're swimming in money. So what's the debate about then, Tom?
The debate is about the post office having to set aside 5 to 6.
They're running a deficit of $16 billion a year. What do you think they should do?
They're not running a deficit of $16 billion a year, first of all. And they've run a cumulative deficit probably in that neighborhood since this poison pill was put in 2006. But the fact of the matter is that the post office would be doing just fine if it weren't for this poison pill. I mean, this was an attempt to take down the post office. Stopping Saturday delivery is simply a way of saying lay off, what would the percentage be?
Electric cars.
1 out of 6.
All Teslas or whatever, and that then all of a sudden
it's an attempt to cut the largest unionized employer in America. It's very simple. It's very transparent. There are Republicans who will brag about this, Carrie.
Where's the money going to come from? From letter delivery? What is it? I don't understand. How are you going to close the gap? This is
what gap?
The gap on the budget.
You say it's no longer necessary for the post office to fund health benefits for people who are hired 75 years from now, whose parents haven't even been born. It's no longer necessary to fund their health benefits.
Okay, well then, Tom, but in the meantime, I would expect a good liberal like you to be a little more concerned about the abuse of the trees that comes through the junk mail that's being passed.
You're on thin ice, Carrie.
For a lot
if that's the best you got, you're on thin ice. Okay, Carrie Lukas, on the record against junk mail. I guess we can agree on that. Thank you, Carrie. IWF.org, by the way, the website. We'll do that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So what's being done to save the post office? Well, Bernie's trying his best, but he can't get a lot of senators, and the Republicans totally are opposed to this because, as I said, the post office is unionized.